Working the night shift definitely is not favorable to most, but somebody like me who's a night owl, it's a blessing if you really don't like your job. These subscribers sent in their allegedly true experiences while working the night shift that'll creep you out. Joining me today is my good friend Slumber Reads. He read story number 2, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to his channel. You can find the link to do so in the description down below. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share a story with everyone here in the swamp, stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, let's get into these allegedly true, creepy stories from the night shift. So I used to be a security guard at a homeless shelter earlier this year. I worked there for 5 months before leaving. So, back in March, I was at work doing what I needed to do. On the ground floor was a daytime only homeless shelter, and on the top was a government homeless outreach office. This is who my contract were through, but I had to keep the entire building secure even though the shelter was a different organization. The government office was the mental health branch, so it wasn't uncommon for crazy people to, act crazy. This particular day, an individual came up to pick up his medication. The man took the medication, walked over to the couch, and sits in the office. The place is laid out like a doctor's office and is posted in the lobby. After sitting down, the guy starts digging through his backpack and pulls out a bag of white pills. This instantly catches my attention. He grabs his pocket knife, doesn't open the blade, and smashes 3 or 4 pills, uses his hands to make it into dust into 3 lines, then snorts all the dust up. What remained, he swept and flung off the table. This is how, I guess, he took his medicine. This is now considered to be acting hostile and potentially illegal. So, I walked over and start trying to ask the man to leave. He keeps telling me, "I gotta take my meds." I inform him that he needs to leave some more, when he says out loud without looking at me, "You know I got a suppressed 9mm in my bag. That'll make you and that receptionist shut up." Alarm bells start ringing. I now have a potentially active shooter scenario on my hands, and I'm an unarmed officer. I calmly walk back to the receptionist and whisper to her to get the other client up, call 911, and go lock herself in an exam room and do not open the door. She does this all as well as informs the other co-workers of the situation. They all lock and barricade the doors. There are cameras in the lobby, so this all was recorded and turned over to the police. After many attempts to get the man to leave and informing him that the police were called and en route, he gets up, gets in my face, and tells me quietly, "I'm coming back for you one day," and storms out. The police arrive 5 minutes later. They examine the footage and put an APB on the man, and take samples of the powder left on the table. A few days later, I'm informed that the man was found with no guns, no drugs, and the powder turned out to be antipsychotic medication. He had allegedly lost the bottle they came in. Nothing had happened, but still, as a 19-year-old unarmed security guard, it scared the hell out of me. For those curious, I still work for the same company, but I now work 3rd shift in a completely different location.
A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a woman and was 31 at the time. I know to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store, and the sheriff's office was about 20 feet across from it. I really didn't think I would have that many problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on a busier night. It was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot, and last minute checked the trash. It was time for a cigarette, and I had one headphone in, kinda jamming out. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much needed piss. Against the sheriff's office though, Yeah, the building closes at 4 p.m. and doesn't open again till 6 in the morning. But why? By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remember that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell he had a good buzz going. I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off of him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in. I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me, and back and forth again. As the customer is leaving, I walked her outside. I still had half a smoke burning, and had left my dustpan outside with the squeegee. We both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be afraid of me, or something like that. The man was still there but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. Whatever he's yelling was completely unintelligible. He was obviously very drunk and can barely stand upright, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store. Something about his face really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during graveyard jobs has been that the crazy-eyed ones are the worst ones. I didn't like it at all, and wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go, and 2 before any other employee got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign, just in case he wanted trouble. I was coming around the corner on my way to the doors when I saw that he'd walked across the road to my side now. I literally just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. My hand makes the mimed hand signal for cut across my neck, basically saying, "Nope, sorry, you can't come in here. We're closed." I shook my head back and forth in hopes to farther discourage him. He started walking away but screamed something at me while he's walking. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything. I mean like he was at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere, definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job. I got really skeeved out. I decided to call the cops. It's a good thing too, because the minute I hung up with them, there he comes again up to the door. He starts pulling and banging on it. He backs up and runs into it trying to ram it. Not that it would have done any good. I made the mistake of telling him that I had called the cops, and his ass was about to be grass. I say I made the mistake of telling him because once I said that, he took off. The police never found him. They drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but found no one. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything. I was safe behind thick glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift. It just sucked. Maybe if I didn't warn him ahead of time, I wouldn't have had to spend the last 3 months of my job constantly looking over my shoulder. I'll never know what the right choice was. I'm just glad I don't work there anymore.
So this happened a little over 2 years ago now, and I wanted to post it somewhere just to look back at it one day and never forget the lesson I learned. So I figured sharing it on your show was the best way to do this. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a motel. It was a low pay, but I needed an office job. One of my friends, Michael, got me this job for a few days. I did training with the owner in the mornings. For 2 nights, Michael trained me. Our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing exciting. Checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for about a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So, it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property and a large glass window all around the office building with a glass door. There was no night window like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night, at about 1 a.m., and I was just doing my normal check-in paperwork when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually, if someone is sketchy, my boss has me lie and say no, but he seemed normal at the moment. Without hesitation, I said, "Yes, of course, just for one?" And he replied yes. So I began creating the reservation on the computer, when I noticed he started swatting the air and making spitting noises as if he was surrounded by flies. I tried to ignore it. As far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business. So I try to check him into the room as quickly as possible. I give him his key and he's on his way. At this point, I could be described as very timid. I had a lot going on in my personal life, so I hope you can all understand my reaction to what happens next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door and causes me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I look up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" And my only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied, "Maybe there's something wrong with your key. Let me give you another one." The look he had in his eyes was inexplicable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key, and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he is the one who trained me, though it was the middle of the night and he was probably asleep. I needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back, and I go into an absolute panic. I run into the back office and lock the door, and I pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello? Hello? Why won't you let me into the room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not standing my ground and calling the police when I'm feeling scared, I decide to take the situation on alone. I reply, "I'm just on the phone, I'll be right out," and I start calling Michael over and over for help. No answer. I decide to take a few deep breaths and then step out of the office. The man was not there. He was in the bathroom. I started hearing him talking to himself angrily saying, "Kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police, he comes out and say, "Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long sleeve sweater, so with my arms down, I was able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I began to walk outside and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. We began making our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, continuously looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room, a few doors down. I smile and say, "Oh, that's the wrong room, this is your room," as it clearly said on the door. The whole time he was going to someone else's room and trying to open the door. I felt bad for them. I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I felt bad for confiding in them about the guy, but they seemed willing to keep an eye and ear out. The next night the man came back, but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. My story is definitely not poop your pants scary or anything like that, but it has left me shaken and very uneasy about working late night shifts. Anyways, I had just finished my first year of university, and I had taken up a position as a taxi dispatcher with my boyfriend's cousin's taxi company. For the first week and a half, I worked mainly day shifts until the owner decided to extend the hours to 24/7, and I was the lucky employee who would be covering 3 or 4 of these shifts a week. The next week I was working my first night shift alone. The driver would be out all night looking for fares, which meant a lot of the night would just be me. I wasn't uneasy working such a shift by myself since I had worked a 24-hour coffee shop and was used to midnight shifts. It was also a Wednesday or Thursday night, so it wasn't very busy. The best part about this job was that my boss let me use the internet to play video games on my laptop in the office. From the computer desk in the office, I could see the front door, a portion of the front desk, and most of the front windows, so I could keep a close eye on what was happening around outside. Plus, the bell above the door always alerted me to a new customer, so I wouldn't be caught off guard if I was too into my game. On this particular night, I was working with a taxi driver named Dave. Dave is about 6'3" and 300 pounds, plus he suffers from several health problems, one of which made all of his movements slow and painful. He definitely wasn't Mr. Fitness or the type of person who would be able to defend themselves or others very easily. Sometime during the early hours of the morning, around 1:30 or 2 a.m., Dave gets a call to go pick up someone in a town 15 minutes away. He gathered up his stuff and drove into the night while I headed into the office and continued playing my video game. About 15 minutes later, I caught something over the top of my laptop. My mind froze. I could hear panting in the reflection of the window. I could see someone sitting on one of the waiting chairs. I walked to the doorway that connects to the front room with the office. I glanced into the sitting area and nearly shit bricks. Some guy with a massive rat tail had managed to ninja his way into the office and was now sitting in one of the chairs with his face buried in his hands, panting heavily. He was dirty, sweaty, and sounded like he had just run a marathon. Now, the rat tail should have tipped me off, but I found him more hilarious than frightening. A few moments passed and I finally got up the courage to ask him if he needed a cab. He didn't respond at first. I asked him again and he looks up at me. I took a step back into the office. His face was scratched and covered in blood from the wound on the top of his head. I was shocked and immediately offered assistance to him. He replies, "I'm fine. I don't need any help. I just want to go home." I asked if he needed a cab and if so, where he was going. He told me he lives about 20 minutes away and he wants Dave to take him home. After that, he started to get really weird. I called over to Dave using the radio to tell him that there was a fare in the office and that he wanted a ride. He told me he'd be another 10 minutes. My hand was on the phone the entire time in case the guy made any sudden movements. Instead of going back into the office, I decided it was best to stay out front where there were 2 great big bay windows that would make it easy to see what is happening inside the taxi office. I didn't feel as though he was a threat at all, but he seemed really angry at something, so I wanted to make sure that if something happened to me, people would be able to see it. So I walked out into the front room as I got closer to the gentleman. That's when I see it. He's not just bleeding from the head, but from the shoulder and knee. I asked him again if he's okay, and then I offered to call an ambulance for him. Bad idea. "You don't need to be doing that," he told me. "It ain't like I killed nobody, okay?" I'm sorry, I just noticed that you were bleeding pretty badly and thought that maybe you would like someone to make sure you're okay, I replied. I didn't kill nobody. That asshole should have kept his mouth shut. He should have known what was coming to him. He shouldn't have said those things. It ain't like I killed nobody. You don't need to call anybody, I just want to go home. Okay, I tell him, but you're bleeding. It ain't like I killed nobody, he replied. I swear I didn't kill nobody. Please don't call the cops. I don't need the cops. I just want to go home. Silence for a few minutes. He notices the phone clutched in my hand. I fell down, he blurted out. Pardon? I fell, he repeated. That's why I'm bleeding. It ain't like I killed nobody. He got up and started pacing. He was growing impatient for his cab, and I was scared shitless. Blood was now on the chair and floor. I had the phone in my hand, and every once in a while he broke the silence with another string of incoherent babbling about how he had done nothing wrong because he hasn't killed anybody, and I didn't need to call the cops because he was a good guy. Eventually, Dave radios over that he is about 2 minutes away, and I breathed a sigh of relief. He pulled up out front, the man gets into the car, and they drive off. Now I'm worried for Dave, so I call the cops. I reported what happened, and they followed the taxi cab to this guy's house where they arrested him. Turns out this guy had run away from a nearby bar after he had physically assaulted a fellow patron. To what extent, I never found out. Apparently he injured him with a sharp object, I assume a pocket knife or a needle, took off running, fell, and managed to find his way to the taxi office. During this time in the cab, the police had been searching for him. So technically, no, he didn't kill anyone, but he did assault and attempt to kill someone. I also found out that one of the other drivers, Steven, knew the guy from high school years ago. His name is Duke, explains the rat tail, and has a history of violence. He also has a history of coming home drunk and cracking his wife's skull open from time to time. Whether he had planned to that night, I couldn't say, but I'm just glad that the guy ended up in the drunk tank for the night. His wife was unharmed and the guy who got stabbed didn't die. At least, I assume he didn't, since I still see Duke every now and then walking the streets with his glorious rat tail, which means he didn't get arrested. In all seriousness, I wish you guys could have seen his rat tail. That thing was impressive. It may not be dramatic or particularly scary to some people, but I wanted to share this experience anyway, so thank you for allowing me to do that. I recently got a job at a hotel downtown from where I live. I have never worked in the hotel industry before, so I had no idea what to expect. The time between applying for the job and being hired was less than 24 hours, which made me kind of nervous, honestly. But I had been looking for several months and couldn't find anything, so I thought I'd take a chance. This hotel is about 150 years old and has plenty of character. Behind the front desk, there are places where the wallpaper was torn away, revealing this psychedelic wallpaper from what I can only guess was the 70s. We're talking a bright pink, neon green, hookah-induced vision type of wallpaper. The walls and the upper floors are painted bright orange and yellow, and the hallways are narrow enough to give off a shining kind of feel to it, but I'll elaborate on that later. My manager is a young Chinese man in his mid-20s, only 5 years older than me. The man who owns the building is also Chinese, and literally a walking stereotype. The owner is friendly and kind to the employees, but he's also rich enough that he doesn't really care if the hotel isn't up to par. I learned recently that he also owns one of the more run-down shopping centers downtown, so this might explain the less than 5-star quality of the hotel. Probably about a 3.5 star, in my opinion. Some people describe the place as quaint, unique, and full of characters, while others describe it as outdated or disappointing. As a history enthusiast, I would agree that the place is full of character, but I also think the owner should be a little more concerned about keeping the place clean. There are lots of problems in this hotel, including mice, broken toilets, falling ceiling tiles, leaks, and other maintenance nightmares. The fancier rooms on the upper levels have real fireplaces in them, so that adds the risk of fires at the hand of careless guests. Mice are a common problem, and I'm thankful the guests don't have to see all the dusty traps filled with dead rodents in the basement. By far, the most interesting aspect of the hotel is that it's supposed to be haunted. There are 2 ghosts that have been reported in the building, as well as the adjoining pub next door. Back when the hotel was first built, it had the reputation of being a complete dive. A lady named Lady Churchill died in the hotel, and her spirit supposedly lingers in the haunted room 49. Guests will occasionally smell her perfume or see her face in the mirror. One of the most frightening stories included someone opening the door only to have Lady Churchill fly at them in fury. On my first day when my boss toured me around the hotel, he pointed out the haunted room to me. Lady Churchill has also been spotted at the fireplace in the pub arguing with her boyfriend and the other resident ghost, Brady. Brady was apparently stabbed to death on the basement stairwell. The stairwell is not in use anymore, as it leads from the street directly into the basement. Instead, it's used to store extra chairs and miscellaneous items. The light is never turned on, which adds more of a creep factor. My shift is the day shift from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Every morning when I come in, I have to check the entire hotel by myself in search of homeless people sleeping in the back stairwell or trying to get in through the basement. I'm not an intimidating person. I'm a short female, not physically fit, and too friendly for my own good. If I did find someone hiding in the hotel, what was I supposed to do about it? I'm not sure which creeps me out more. The fact that I'm going around looking for people who shouldn't be there, or the idea that I have to walk through the dark and silent areas known to be haunted all by myself. My sweep of the hotel includes all 4 floors of guest rooms, the kitchen, the back stairwell, the basement stairwell, and the basement. To give you some context, the back stairwell serves as a fire escape connecting all the floors together. It goes straight down to the street level. It's always cold and echoey in there, and as I said before, full of dead mice. When I was first told about the haunted stairway, I mistakenly thought they meant the fire escape stairs that go down to the basement level. The 4 floors for guest rooms in all their overlook hotel glory are shaped like a square horseshoe, which means more than enough blind corners where creepy twins might suddenly appear are definitely there. Lady Churchill's haunted room is at the end of a hall around one of these blind corners, and yes, I do think about that every time I search the hotel. There is an elevator and interior stairway that one guests are supposed to use. Behind the elevator is the old connecting hallway that basically serves no purpose anymore. In the past it may have been useful, but now it just serves as a secret passageway that goes behind the elevator and comes out at the other end of the horseshoe. This hallway especially needs to be searched for homeless people, drunks, or people having sex. The basement is by far the creepiest part of the hotel. To get there, you can either take the elevator or go through the pub and down the stairs. I prefer to go through the pub because there are some fascinating black and white photos from when the hotel was first built, and I love to look at them. It's also the best place to see the age of the brick foundation. Anyway, the basement is used for storing beer kegs, firewood, planter pots, housekeeping items, and maintenance tools, among other things. It's usually deserted. Now that I know the dark, unused basement stairway is where Brady's spirit is supposed to be, I think I'll try to spend even less time down there. This week is my second week of work, and my boss has put me on the afternoon and evening shift, just so I can get a sense of what it's like in case I have to cover anybody in the future. Yesterday was my first late shift, and in the time I learned a whole bunch of things I didn't know from the lady I worked with. This woman, let's call her Peggy, has been at the hotel for 14 years. She's seen all there is to see and, well, is known for her stories. I've listened to some of these stories and honestly, part of me thinks she's full of crap, but the other part's going to cautiously believe her, on the off chance that it's true. Here are some things I learned about the hotel in the span of one shift. The man I'm replacing was not actually fired for chronic lateness, as the boss told me, but instead for sexual harassment. The head of housekeeping, a man I get along very well with, is a friend of his. The day before, Peggy caught a drug addict rooting around in the private back office after hours. We looked over the security footage and he was definitely searching for something. We now keep the office doors locked. There were 2 guests several years ago who stayed at the hotel, and the next day, they robbed a jewelry store downtown and fled back to the hotel with everything they'd stolen. There was a massive police standoff on the roof, SWAT teams and all. There's a news article about it online, otherwise I never would have believed it. The bedrock of the hotel can be found in the boiler room. There's a slight gap filled in on the top right corner that connects directly to the street. One time, Peggy came down to the boiler room to find a man halfway through the gap head first, trying to get in because he wanted to know what was down there. That image terrifies me. In the span of that one night shift, an alarm went off in the basement. The police showed up at the pub and I guess verbally abused the day staff over non-existent shuttles to the hospital. No, not an ambulance, a shuttle. Taking the bus was beneath him, I suppose. And at my bus stop after my shift, a man was shooting up in public. My city has a drug epidemic going on right now. My bus took half an hour to arrive, and when I got off at my stop, it was as foggy as Silent Hill. I felt as though I would be looking around for Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees. It is October after all. That's one night shift down. I have another tonight and one more the day after. If anything else interesting happens, I'll keep you updated. I mostly just wanted to get this off my chest. It's amazing how different the hotel is after 3 p.m. Much louder, that's for sure. Much louder, that's for sure. Thanks to the pub on one side and the bar on the other. Everyone I've gotten to know during my first week of work has already gone home, leaving me with drunks, strangers, and Peggy's crazy stories. One thing's for sure, after 3 nights of this, I'll never complain about getting up early again. Thanks for listening to these allegedly true, creepy stories from the night shift. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. If you're new to the swamp, why not subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. Much thanks to my friend Slumber Reads, who helped me a ton today by reading story number 2. If you enjoyed his reading, be sure to check out his channel in the description down below and subscribe to him. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to visit swampdweller.net and submit your story. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Stories like yours that keep this channel going. You can also get my stories on iTunes, Spotify, and many other places. Be sure to check that out and leave me a review. It helps out this channel a ton. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.